The truth about TikTok is, and I'm aware of this, and many others in the social media industry and the software and AI industries know this, TikTok is weapons-grade spyware, period. It's one of the best propaganda machines I've ever seen. And if you want evidence of it, go on in the last 24 hours and look at the videos generated there through AI of overweight Americans at sewing machines, even the president himself depicted here, or over iPhones screwing in screws with the message, "Let's make America great again." I have never seen such blatant propaganda. And yet somehow, and I'm calling foul as an issuer of securities that's forced by these regulations that I abide by for obvious reasons and I want to be compliant, but I also have to bear the escalating costs each year, which are millions of dollars to be compliant. And yet I look right beside me on a listing and I see a Chinese company that is completely ignoring these regulations and suffers no outcome at all. There's no consequences.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Hope all's good wherever you are. Kevin O'Leary today appeared in front of Congress to discuss the threat of China against America, against American retirees, against our businesses, and how they undermine our national security. This was awesome. Let's go.
First, I'd like to welcome Kevin O'Leary. Mr. O'Leary is also known as Mr. Wonderful. He's a business leader, investor, and known to millions of Americans for his role in the hit TV show Shark Tank. Most important to today's hearing, Mr. O'Leary understands the risks and threats posed by Communist China and why investing in your retirement there is a bad deal for any Americans. Even though he was born in Canada, I'm proud that he has now caused the Sunshine State his home. Mr. O'Leary, thank you for being here today. You may begin your testimony.
Chairman Scott, Molinar, Ranking Members Gillibrand, and Krishna, I'm getting this right, Krishnamurthy, members of the Senate Special Committee on Aging and the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, thank you for inviting me to participate in today's important hearing. I want to use my opening statement to shine a light on an issue that impacts millions of American investors, many of whom have invested their retirement funds in the equity markets. The threats posed by the Chinese Communist Party I will discuss today impact anyone and everyone like me who has tried to do business in China, everyone that invests in the stock market, anyone that invests in passive investment vehicles like international index funds or mutual funds, any retail investor that invests in Chinese companies, anyone who invests internationally in emerging markets like China, and everyone with a 401k plan or pension invested in international index funds. I have nothing against the Chinese people. Their contributions to science and art over the millennia are well documented. It's their government I take issue with. In my opinion, since joining the WTO in 2000, the Chinese government has never played by its rules. This has led to the CCP to passing various laws in the realm of cybersecurity, espionage, intelligence, and beyond, and other mechanisms to control its corporations, industries, and business partnerships, all to the detriment of U.S. investors. This is not a new phenomenon. It has been part of the long game China's been playing for decades. Let me just elaborate briefly on a few reasons why the time for us to address this matter is today. In its desire to reduce state-run companies and their holdings in them, the Chinese government divested itself from them. However, in return for taking a 1% share in the company, the government is granted a seat on the board, voting power and influence over all business decisions. It's effectively a super voting right. This is the so-called golden share that she is using today to control the potential sale of TikTok. If China maintaining control of companies wasn't bad enough for investors, China prevents foreigners from owning Chinese companies. Instead, they're cleverly exploiting the U.S. financial system creation of variable interest entities, VIEs, to approximate the ownership of corporate shares. If you own stock in a company like Tencent, Alibaba, or ICBC, you don't actually own stock in a company. You own a share of a contract of something in the Cayman Islands that is trying to approximate stock ownership. The U.S. has given China preferential treatment for over a decade through its own special memorandum of understanding that governs accounting standards and oversight. This sweetheart deal with the Public Accounting Oversight Board, the PCAOB, has allowed China to continue to game the U.S. financial system via their special treatment that is not afforded to other countries, even our allies. This is a completely unbalanced and non-reciprocal situation. And why do we allow this? How can this be viewed in any way as fair to American investors? There should be complete parity between the U.S. and China. I believe Congress should act to delist CCP-affiliated companies until there is a parity of treatment for Western businesses in China. If we can't own stocks in their country, they should not be allowed to own stocks in the U.S. Unless businesses can operate in China with the same freedoms that Chinese businesses have here, we should not let their businesses operate in the U.S. We should exit China's marketplace until the CCP makes significant reforms. We should demand that all Chinese companies engaged in U.S. markets complied with U.S. accounting standards. For decades across multiple administrations, we have discussed leveling the playing field with China. Instead, the situation has only gotten worse. Make no mistake, I want to do business in China, as so do millions of other investors and companies. But we want reciprocal ecosystem in place that is transparent, where all parties play by the rules mutually agreed upon. I want access to Chinese legal systems so trade and IP grievances can be litigated and resolved. The Chinese enjoy these rights in the U.S. Why do we not have them in China? Lately, there's been a lot of rhetoric about, during negotiations globally, on who holds the cards, quote unquote. The U.S. is still the world's largest market, supported by the world's largest economy under the rule of democratic law. That is why so much of the world's capital is invested here. That's a lot of leverage. Let's fix this Chinese problem while we still hold the cards. I look forward to a robust conversation today and answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Let me just stop it right here quickly before we get back to it. If you don't mind, just smashing that thumbs up button for your boy. And also, if this is not your first time here and you're not yet subscribed, hopefully this could be the video that I earn your subscription. Let's get back to Mr. Wonderful himself, Kevin O'Leary.
Thank you, Mr. O'Leary. Now I'd like to welcome Christopher Icavella. Mr. O'Leary, so can you explain this idea that Chinese companies, American can buy into make an investment in a Chinese company, and we have no idea whether their financial statements are accurate because they don't have an obligation like American companies do to comply with general accepted accounting principles. And our SEC has not enforced rules which would require any American company to comply, but not for whatever reason Chinese companies don't have to. And what's the risk to an investor?
No transparency. Regulations in the U.S. and the regulatory environment and the bodies that enforce it have created the most successful capital markets on earth. More than half, or almost 60% of the world's capital is invested because of the rules put in place for transparency and appellate courts and everything that makes these capital markets work in the United States. And yet somehow, and I'm calling foul as an issuer of securities that's forced by these regulations that I abide by for obvious reasons and want to. I want to be compliant. But I also have to bear the escalating costs each year, which are millions of dollars to be compliant. And yet I look right beside me on a listing and I see a Chinese company that is completely ignoring these regulations and suffers no outcome at all. There's no consequences. And I understood the law gave them 36 months for compliance, and then it was adjusted down to 24 months, and still they're listed, and still I have to compete with them to raise capital, and they don't even have to pay the compliance costs. I mean, what's wrong with this picture? How can this possibly be going on? And I'm so excited that finally this is getting national focus. This is absolutely outrageous and unfair. And we're letting them take this capital they raise in these markets, that we can't do the same thing there, we can't litigate there, we can't protect our IP there. They use the courts, the American court system, to litigate my companies after they steal the IP and knock the product off. And I can't do anything about it except come here and say, wake up. Like, this has got to stop. It's got to stop, and they have to pay the consequences. There has to be consequences. I would be in a federal jail doing what they do in terms of not being transparent on their quarterly statements. There's no way this can go on.
So the Securities and Exchange Commission requires a company that wants to be sell stock to the public to provide disclosure of anything that's material. On top of that, they require them to give audited financial statements, right?
Right.
And that's what you have to do, right?
And I also have to disclose if I have a super preference share. It has to be disclosed that one individual controls the entire outcome of the board and the company. Who would want to invest in a company like that? Do you think I could raise any money if I disclosed that? As I have a golden share in my structure that only I can decide all outcomes on every single issue? The board is irrelevant. That's basically what that share is. Could I even compete? And I bet you there are hundreds of companies that have not disclosed that, listed in America today on the NASDAQ and the NYSE. Why are they trading? I can't do that. How come they can? They gotta be, listen, if you think that's okay and you want to invest in a company where one individual has a super golden share, go ahead. The chances you go to zero are very high because that person may not have any governance or any momentum or any consideration of the rest of the shareholders. That's why we don't allow this here. And that's why we're the most successful capital market on earth, because investors feel confident there are no golden shares on the balance sheet, because the board would enjoy time in a federal prison if they tried that. And we don't do that to the Chinese, and it's just got to stop.
Freaking China. We should have never let these guys get into the World Trade Organization. We can all thank Mr. Clinton for that, for letting that happen. This is why Trump was on these tariffs. The entire trade conversation starts and ends with China. All of it. It is a narrow zero in focus on the dominance of the Chinese Communist Party. We created this problem, and now it's time for us to fix it as Americans. We need to fix the problem. The Chinese Communist Party would not be an emerging global superpower if it was not for us letting him, again, into the World Trade Organization. And the global elites that have ran our country have lined their pockets by letting China have all these loopholes into our market. They get richer and richer and richer by selling us cheap plastic, and they use our money to build an empire. Let's get back to it.
So number one, they're not complying with SEC rules. Number two, they're not complying with exchange rules. And number three, anybody that's taken them public, all right, they can't comply because they can't disclose anything material because there's not enough information, right?
Why wouldn't you put consequences on those that facilitate this? I would love to pour boiling oil over my competitors that are not being compliant. That's why we have competitive markets. I know what the rules are. If I want to do a listing, I want to raise capital, I want to do an RTO, whatever it is, I know what the rules are, and I cannot be non-compliant. Yet, I'm competing with companies that go after that same dollar from the investor that are totally opaque. That's just wrong. And I'm happy to come here and scream about it. Happy to do that. I'm happy that we're having this narrative.
Thank you, Mr. Leary. Now I'll turn it over to Chairman Molinari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. O'Leary, if I could follow up with you on some things. You know, we're here to explore today the risky business of investing in Chinese companies, and it's an area where you have some experience as a potential purchaser of TikTok. And TikTok, as you know, is one of the most prominent Chinese companies on the planet. And when you were putting together your TikTok bid, what sorts of national security and legal risks were you most concerned about, and how did those risks affect the bid that you constructed?
The truth about TikTok is, and I'm aware of this, and many others in the social media industry and the software and AI industries know this, TikTok is weapons-grade spyware, period. It's one of the best propaganda machines I've ever seen. And if you want evidence of it, go on in the last 24 hours and look at the videos generated there through AI of overweight Americans at sewing machines, even the president himself depicted here, or over iPhones screwing in screws with the message, "Let's make America great again." I have never seen such blatant propaganda. And that's why, in this situation, this law was written. And it's very specific, and this is before the Supreme Court 9-0 ruling about redefining what these laws said regarding the algorithm. What it says is we cannot, any interested syndicate that wants to buy this cannot use the algorithm. That's the plain language. and then further defined with higher resolution on the top paragraphs of page 5 of the 9-page ruling from the Supreme Court, 9-0, very definitive, no algorithm. Now, many syndicates have been formed with the idea of leasing the code, leasing the algorithm, buying the algorithm, fixing it, putting it on an American server. What everybody was looking for in the capital markets was a definition of whether this was even possible. Would you write an indemnification? Would you put that indemnification in the Reconciliation Act and attempt to get 51 votes? Would you go back to Congress to change the law and get 60 votes to allow an indemnification for the buyer to survive into the next administration? Because the penalty is $5,000 per 24 hours per account. That's $80+ billion a quarter. Nobody's going to do that unless they're indemnified. And I've understood today from Senator Cotton that's off the table. Now we have clarity. Whoever's going to buy TikTok is not going to buy the algorithm, period. That's clear. And I think that's great that you've done that because it makes the competition much more in focus. And do I want TikTok to survive? Yes. I'm an advocate, as you know, for small business in America, companies between 5 and 500 employees, very successful platform. Over 7 million families make their living on TikTok. It's the lowest customer acquisition cost vehicle in America. It's a great competitive product when it's used properly. I'd love to be part of the syndicate that buys it. There's no question about it. But I'm also an advocate for these small businesses because they create 62% of jobs in America. They are the American economy. I'd like to see this product survive. Happy to play by the rules.
We have to understand one thing when it comes to China, right? What Kevin O'Leary's talking about. This is an interesting conversation. I love listening to the man talk. All these really savvy business dudes, these entrepreneurs, I love listening to those conversations. But understand that China is desperate for energy, big time. They're desperate, and they're in the need of continually exporting products. This was the deal with Trump's tariffs. Let's get China to the table. This was the whole plan after all. We need them a lot less than they need us. Them putting tariffs on us was so crazy because we don't really export that much to them. It's a 100 to 1 dollar-wise, the amount of business that they export to us versus what we export to them. They need our global marketplace way more than we need their plastic crap. America is the global market. It is the global marketplace. This is why everybody wants to be here selling their stuff. And this is why Trump was imposing those tariffs, to get Xi Jinping to the table so that we can talk and restructure all this thing. So America does hold the leverage here. We hold the leverage not in spite of our trade deficit, but because of our trade deficit. Tariffs are a great way to flip the balance of power, to create an imbalance and forcing our trade partners, in this case China, to comply and to come to the table. Let's get back to it.
100%.
Can I just follow up with you? You talked about the golden share, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And relative to TikTok, does Xi Jinping have a golden share in ByteDance?
Ask yourself why, when we're talking about buying TikTok, we're not talking about the shareholders of the company that own it called ByteDance. They seem to be irrelevant in this negotiation. There is only one narrative that matters. Every buyer knows this. What is President Trump, going to do with Xi on TikTok? 100% he has a golden share. There's no other way this deal's getting done. And I think that's the case for hundreds of companies that have raised capital in the American markets. He will personally decide. You may not like that. I certainly don't. But I respect it to be a fact. And I know I can't do this deal, or anybody can, without his decision on what the structure is going to be. And the laws currently here allow for the Chinese to own up to 19.9% of this as a media company. These laws are already in place. I'm happy to work with this deal, as every syndicate would be, as long as it's compliant. But does Xi have a golden share? 100%. He alone will decide.
Thank you very much.
That's not a money, right? You can just start with $100 or $500. That is up to you.
I'll start with you, Mr. O'Leary. We've heard from a couple of our members today on the CCP's use of golden shares as a vehicle, but it also seems to be a vehicle for party control inside private companies. From your vantage point, are there any private companies in China that have the ability to refuse a request from this over business decisions under this structure?
I'm sure they have the right to do that, and then you don't hear from them anymore. That's what I think happens. It's sort of a Jack Ma situation. I mean, you got to toe the party line. I think those are the rules. That's how it works. He was an extraordinarily successful entrepreneur, and then he disappeared for a while. And I think that's how it works. I think if you refuse to cooperate with the golden share participation, remember, they're selling down to 1% with effective super rights with that 1%. And, you know, I'm not sure you can go to your counsel in China and say, look, I'd like to object for this and litigate this in court. In fact, I'm sure you can't do that. That's what you would do here. If the government said to me, you're going to sell, you know, we're going to sell our complete holdings and we're going to keep 1%, and we're going to tell you what to do every day in one of my public companies, I'd say, sure, let's go to court. That's why people invest here, because there is an appellate system on a check and balance of crazy ideas like that. So my answer would be, there's no difference in China between a public company or a private one. There's just a golden share. That's it.
Mr. O'Leary, I should say, you are always saying people think that they are investing in Chinese companies, and in fact, they are investing in ways that may be undermining our own interests or undermining their own interests. I know you've had experience with that. You've been gracious enough to give time and talk to other senators about that. And again, we've discovered things over time, and I'll go back to we caught them setting up police stations in our own country, right? We caught them stealing intellectual property from our universities and setting up institutes within our universities. I mean, there are ways that we have tried to reveal these very directed, specific targeting of undermining American interests. And so I'll turn my first question to Mr. O'Leary. You have discussed how American investors essentially own nothing in China and how the CCP government maintains an ultimate veto over its companies. In your view, what efforts can we do to convince our colleagues and the American people that the government of China cannot be trusted as long as we're willing to tolerate the totalitarian regime in Beijing?
Well, step one, which I think is going to be the easiest path of least resistance, is to simply enforce existing laws, particularly in capital markets, where those of us that are compliant have to compete with entities that are not. And so if you have a golden share, or if you haven't produced GAAP statements that are transparent over the last 24 months, you're going to get delisted. And that's going to be billions of dollars getting evaporated off our exchanges. And that, I think, is a wake-up call to China, which really, if you think about it, wants to become the 8th member of the G7, so the G8. They want to play with the big boys. They're going to have to play by the rules. Everything stems from capital. You can't build an economy all on your own. You have to get access to capital. And we have provided an amazing platform for China to tap into the world's greatest economy from a consumer basis where they can sell their products, and also the rule of law to raise capital. And that has not been fair. It's not been a level playing field. Just to be sure, I actually want to invest in China, and I want to compete in China, and I want to be able to sell products to Chinese consumers. I've got nothing against Chinese consumers. I feel that American technology and innovation can compete anywhere, and I just want to compete on a level playing field. We need to impose a level playing field, and the only way to do that, after watching for 20 years and multiple administrations, not only here domestically but internationally, nobody has called them to the rug. Nobody has said, okay, you're not complying, and all they've been taught from us is there's no consequence. You can do whatever the hell you want, and you don't pay the price. That is what our message has been for 25 years. And I'm only asking, as one voice. When is this going to change? I mean, when? Because if it doesn't change now, they're going to continue to take advantage of us in every way possible, including IP theft, which I bet you, and this is a personal opinion, you give me any Chinese technology that's advanced and you reverse engineer it, I'll show you American code from some decade, as many 40 years ago. I swear to you, I believe that. And we never did anything about it then, and we're not doing anything about it now. We're here to say it's got to stop. We're the guys in the front line. We're dealing with this. You've heard my colleagues talk about this. It's just not fair. And I'm just asking for you to impose the existing laws. If you do that, believe me, those boys are coming over here on an airplane. That's what's going to happen. You can't cut off people from the United States market, the largest on earth, and capital markets without a consequence.
The thing about TikTok is so crazy. These social media companies, we've seen that they can sway an election. It's bad enough when we have our own lizards like Mark Zuckerberg swaying elections, 2020. We don't need the Chinese apps spying on us and swaying our elections in whatever way the Communist Party of China would want. Let's get back to it. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, smash that thumbs up to the channel. Help it grow, and I'll catch you all in the next video.